people can overeat, right? We're all going to overeat. We're all going to go out to dinner and have too much cheesecake or too much pasta or whatever it is. That's one thing where we enjoy life and make the choice to overeat. When it comes to binging and using food as a tool, one of the biggest red flags, like I said, is how we're using it in the sense of what is the rate at which we're eating. Like what I mentioned earlier, I had an entire box of cookies in maybe 3 minutes.
Yeah.
And it's like you're shoveling food. That's one. Also, if you're eating in secrecy, a lot of times people who struggle with this have a lot of guilt and shame around food and what they're eating. For example, I could have never back in the day, never had a slice of pizza or gone out to ice cream with a friend, because to me, that was messing up on my diet because I had to be perfect in front of everyone. So I would get the salad and then I would go home and eat at night, or eat in my car and then hide the evidence. If you have guilt and shame around what you're eating, so maybe you do it in secrecy, that's another red flag too. And I think those are probably the two biggest, but also something that we really can't diagnose looking at someone. It's more of like an internal question. What is the reason that we are eating?
Kelly, I am so excited to have you here. I'm excited to be able to chat with you. I know you and I met, and I've actually observed you and watched you for a while before I think we actually officially met. And then it's been so fun to just connect with you over the last probably year. I don't know, time flies, time's flying. So I'm so excited to have you here.
Thank you. Yeah, I was just going to say, I feel like time is a blur. I don't know when I meet people, but yeah, it's been amazing to connect with you. And thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited.
Yeah. Before we dive in, for those that don't know you, would you mind sharing a little bit about who you are, what you do? I know they've already heard kind of your bio, but let's dig in with you and Kelly. Who are you?
Yes. Well, hi, everybody. Hello. My name is Kelly Lyons, and I help women stop binge eating and overeating so they can feel in control around food. And the way I do that is I have an online membership where women can come together with this food struggle and they get through it together. And one of the things I realized is this is something that is extremely isolating. So I think having this community has just helped so many women. And as an entrepreneur, I am learning so much about myself and how to help people and how to be a mentor. And it has been a ride.
Yeah, for sure. I think even just before we were talking about that, all the things that we learn about ourselves as an entrepreneur. And then I mean, probably a big part of what you do too is helping people become so much more aware of why and how they're showing up and why they're doing things. And it's it precipitates in the way we take care of ourselves. And it also participates in the way we parent and then the way we show up in our business, who we are, and those deep down sorts of things kind of ripple into every area of our life and how we show up.
You hit the nail on the head. And so many people that I work with say and I say it all the time, but it's they experience it then. They're like, it had nothing to do with the food, because that is almost just something where we cover up what we've been pushing down or hiding or numbing or refusing to look at. And what I've noticed that so many people go through is when they stop overeating and binging, so many aspects of their life change, right? They get the confidence to ask for the promotion. They're a more present parent. They feel more comfortable having deep conversations with their partner, because it's when you're getting rid of these things that just are a band-aid to the real stuff that's going on, it's we're kind of uncovering so much stuff that we've never even addressed before.
For sure. For
I
sure.
You do that all the time.
So, well, okay, let's reverse and we'll back up a little bit. How did you get into this? Tell us your story. How did you get started on this path and serving people in the way that you are?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it goes back to when I was in high school. That is when my relationship with food went down the freaking drain. So just without going into everything, what happened is my senior year of high school, I played sports, I played soccer and softball, and I didn't know what I wanted the next chapter of my life to look like, I should say. And everybody I know knew where they were going, knew what they were majoring in, what they were doing, who they wanted to be. And I just felt really, really lost and really alone. And it was I didn't know where to turn. I was ending something that was so crucial my entire life, and I had no idea what was next. And what happened next was like I would come home from school when I was no longer having sports, this thing that I loved so much, and I was coming home to an empty house. And I will
Mm.
never forget one day I looked at this bag of red Chips Ahoy, the thin, chewy kind, and I ate the entire freaking bag in maybe 3 minutes.
Yeah.
And immediately it was like, oh my God, what did I just do? But then I drove, got a new package so my parents wouldn't know. And it was like immediately this like secret thing that I was doing to stuff my emotions lower and lower and lower. And then it was like,
Mhm.
okay, well, I rapidly gained weight. Right. So immediately, what did I do? I went on Weight Watchers and to lose the weight. And this cycle of eating in secret and eating as much as I possibly could to not deal with what I was afraid of or what I was going through, followed by having to eat perfect and follow all these
Mhm.
food rules to lose the weight. That cycle, what I was stuck in that for over like 12 years of my life. Food controlled me. Food was the only thing I turned to in front of people. I was this
Mhm.
healthy, going to the gym twice a day, exercise science major. And behind closed doors, it was like I was living two different lives. And I realized that once I recognized it wasn't about the food, and now this took me a
Mhm.
really long time to figure to figure out, but once I realized it wasn't about the food, I was able to actually uncover what was beneath it, right? The anxiety, the feelings of overwhelm, the feelings of stress, because the reasons that I turned to food looked different as the years went on.
Yeah.
And when I realized that the diet industry was a means to keep us stuck and keep us consumers and keep us in this cycle so we would never feel like we were enough and we would
Mhm.
never be the best and truest version of ourselves, that's when my binging and overeating stopped. And when it
Mm.
kind of like dissipated naturally, I was like, oh my gosh, I am onto something.
Yeah.
And a couple years after that, that's when I realized, hey, other people need to realize this. Other people need to learn this because I am not the only one. And unfortunately, so many of us suffer in silence.
Mhm.
And that's kind of how I started and my story. And now my community has over 1,700 members because so many people, again, they do the same things over and over and they're binging and they're overeating get worse.
Yeah.
So this kind of like pulls back the curtain, pulls back the layers, figuring out the deep rooted stuff so the food struggles stop.
Yeah.
That was a long
That's
one.
but it was so good. And I think something that you highlighted in there that I want to like pull out is this idea that like the diet industry is really keeping people from really stepping into like who they really meant to be and like how it's intentionally kind of really keeping people stuck. And I see this like this is something where I watch it, right? And just this weekend, I was like with some friends and I heard this woman and they were talking about weight and diet and whatever. And the one is like super thin. She's in shape. She looks great. Like she's speaking out these things of like, oh, I don't feel like I look good. And like, oh, I need to lose a couple more pounds and this and that. And I'm sitting there thinking, like, you look amazing. Like, how are you not seeing this? Right. Like, this element of, like you said, like, that's keeping people stuck. And I think so many women are feeling that way. And so many people are in this rustle of like, not seeing their own potential and their own beauty. And like, even like now, I'm like, I see it with my 12-year-old. And I'm like, I never talk about my body. Like, I work out because it feels good and I want to take care of myself and it, like how I feel with workout. But I'm very, very intentional to not even slip a little bit in terms of like, I eat this way because of like not wanting the calories or not wanting whatever. It's all about like nutrition and like, whatever. I'm like super intentional. But to hear like even my 12-year-old start saying things like I'm fat or this and I'm like, "Oh my gosh." So, I don't know, like the way you said that in the sense that like it is keeping women stuck. I would love for you to kind of like dig into that and expand on that because like so much of what I teach people is like how do you listen to yourself and listen to your body, and when we do that and like how we listen to our own intuition and our own bodies and our own selves, like how we create so much more and we create so much more freedom. And I think it kind of parallels, but it's a different lens in which I've looked at it. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you completely like took the words right out of my mouth. And I do think that our daughters are going to grow up with such a different way of thinking about themselves and our bodies because we are the ones doing the work and we are the ones
Mhm.
changing. And I'll tell you what, my daughter will be 2 next month, 2. And someone already told me that my daughter is going to be lean because I'm lean. And I was like, she's 21 months and we're already painting this picture of what her
Yeah.
figure will look like. And I immediately said, that is so inappropriate. That is not what I talk about with my daughter. Well,
Yeah.
not even because she's not 2, but like ever.
Yeah.
So that's one. And, I think we are doing the work and we are doing the hard things because I don't know about you. I went through me growing up. My mom, every single person was judging themselves, was judging
Mhm.
the other people, was on Weight Watchers, was doing Jenny Craig, like the crazy, and no matter what, they never felt enough. So, the one thing I wanted to say is it's so crazy when you said we have to learn to trust ourselves.
Mhm.
Something that I tell people is how quickly we forget we were born with the ability to eat when we were hungry and stop when we were full.
Yeah.
That and pooping. All we knew how to do innately. We did not need someone to tell us. We were not looking around at the other babies like, oh, how much how much breast milk is that one having, right? We had this cue to cry when we were hungry and move our head away when we were done eating. And even looking at like when I was struggling, I would look at my younger cousins when I was deep in my binging and I'm like, how is so and so having a couple scoops of ice cream and then being done? How is this 7-year-old having a slice of pizza, just one, or not even a slice, just one bite and then running off to play? It's because they have these innate cues, and we do too. The problem
Mhm.
is we let everything else come in. We let the noise of you don't know how to listen to your body. You don't know when to
Yeah.
stop eating. You don't know when you're hungry. You have to have these shakes. You have to measure your spinach. You have to have a food scale. You have to bring the salad dressing that you want to a restaurant. And I say that because I did that for a very long time. And it's this constant reminder of you do not know
Mhm.
how to listen to your body, and your body is foreign and your body is not your teammate. And
Mhm.
to be completely honest, it is complete and utter BS. And
Mhm.
once we recognize that we have had these gifts and these innate abilities since the minute we were put on this planet, we start to get our power back. And
Yeah.
here's the thing, the diet industry needs us. They need to make money. And the only way they make money is if we keep failing and if things keep like not working. Because
Yeah.
what happens is we diet, we can't take it anymore. We binge, then we feel terrible about the binge, then we swear we're going to make it up, and then we do another diet again. And
Mhm.
it's a $72 billion industry for a reason because we get in there and we stay in there. And that's the problem.
Yeah, it's so much true. And you see so many people like jumping from one thing to the next, to like looking for that one thing that's going to solve their problem. And I'm of the ilk of too, like, there's not one right way for every person. Like, there's not one diet or one thing that's going to help every single person on the planet. And so that's why like people are jumping from one thing to the next, where like if we got back to that place of just like what is true and good and right for you and like how do you listen to those cues. And I love that you like brought up like babies and things like that too, because I was just talking to a group of doctors and I had this conversation around the fact that like looking at our children, like in like childhood, right? Of like eating your full plate, eating everything on your plate, trying everything and like whatever. And then even beyond that, I was like talking about like we tell them when to go to bed, when to wake up, whatever. Like we're telling them when and how to do everything. And essentially, we're teaching them not to listen to themselves. And like, how different would it be if we raised our kids in a way that created boundaries and created some structure? Because clearly, we can't just like let them free for all, whatever they want to do. But how could we help them start to learn how to listen to those cues and like how to listen what's actually going on instead of just ingraining them in this is how we do it and this is what we do. And I, look back at like the where you and I are roughly the same age is like eat your whole plate. There's starving kids in Africa. Like there you got to eat
God.
everything. And how all of those subtle little things really did teach us to stop listening to those satiation cues of like I'm done or I want more, I don't or and I don't know, like there is so much noise about like when to sleep and when to wake up and like how much you do and like whatnot. And for me, it's kind of like breaking that mold and like helping women really learn to trust their body and how their cycle and like their hormones play out. And like, what do you need today? And I love that like you're bringing in with the food and like helping in that way. So, what do you feel like are the biggest takeaways or like the biggest things that shift for women, like when they start working with you or they start kind of going down this road?
Oh, that's such a good question. I think the biggest thing is a lot of them say like, "Wow, I didn't know I had this in me." Like
Mm,
this power that they get of a simple, "No, thanks, I'm not hungry."
yeah.
Because we eat because other people are eating, or we eat to please other people. So for me, like I know I have food sensitivities, and I've known that for a while. When I was struggling, I wouldn't even care because if everyone was eating something, I was going to eat it too because I didn't want to make people feel uncomfortable. I
Mm,
didn't want to put myself first, right? And this freedom, like perfect example, somebody recognized the other day with how much of their brain space has been taken because of food.
yeah.
They said in my community, they were like, oh, and this one like freaking brought tears to my eyes. This was over the holidays and she was making cookies with her daughter. And her daughter was like, "Oh, mommy, try a cookie." And she had one. And she said her two daughters looked at each other and said, "Mommy can finally eat with us now." Like,
Oh,
because she has been
yeah.
trying to diet her whole life and showing her
Yeah.
daughter I can't have a cookie. I can't do this. This is bad.
Mhm.
And she's like, I got to experience that with my children, but then also show my children that no, I can eat what you're eating. I can do
Mhm.
things that make me happy. And, just I have people in my community that when they stopped thinking about food all the dang time, they asked for promotions, they started businesses, they brought up new hobbies, they got
Yeah.
healthy again, they tried different bouts of exercise because when you are focusing so much on what you're going to eat next, what you just ate, what you ate 3 weeks ago, what you had last night that you shouldn't have, what you're going to eat on Friday when you go out to dinner, it's like you don't have any room to be present in ways that actually matter in your life. And it's like you don't
Mhm.
enjoy vacations, you don't enjoy date nights, you don't
Yeah.
enjoy dinners out. You don't enjoy life because you are so just deep rooted in this stuff that we've been told for so long. So I think to answer your question in a really broad umbrella is the
Mhm.
presence of life and just
Yeah.
the ability to step into your power because like, how powerful are we when we stop hating ourselves?
Yeah.
Like, when we can actually be this confident person and be willing to speak up, step up, set boundaries, be the role model, or be the person that we needed when we were younger. Like, how
Mhm.
unstoppable do we become?
Yeah. Well, and what you just like mentioned there too is like, I know there may be somebody listening kind of thinking, like, well, how does this really even tie into business? But what you just talk about is like how we become so different. And this is kind of like pulling back those layers of looking at like who we are and how we show up in business or in all parts of our life is impacting the way we show up in our business and like vice versa. And how when we let go of kind of, I don't want to say skeletons in the closet, but kind of like these
I
things that are that are
know.
that are there that are like shaping who we are and how we're showing up, it changes the way we show up in other ways and like changes how we show up in business. It's not like we can compartmentalize like who we are and how we are for only certain areas of our life. Like it has these ripples into you, like even like you said, like the relationships you have with your kids. So like your experience with food is rippling and changing how you experience with your kids, and it's impacting your relationship with your spouse and your community and your business. It's like it literally impacts every area. It's not just one.
And I think it's made me such a stronger business owner because now so many people that come to me, and I'm sure the same with you, Renee, they relate to our story. They are like, you are
Mhm.
literally speaking to me. If I didn't go through these struggles, but also if I didn't talk about them so openly and freely because I'm so confident in who I am now, people wouldn't relate to me the same. And
Yeah.
to be honest, when I started my business, I'll tell you what, I was terrified to talk about my struggles because my first thing was like, oh my God, what will like my friends from high school think? And I was so afraid. And it's like, not only were people not judgmental, or maybe they were behind my back, but also too, I don't
Who
give a crap,
cares?
right?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
who I get to be. But people were so supportive. And if I didn't have this strength and ability to be open and vulnerable and to be able to come out and be like, hey, this is who I am. This is my story, but here's how I'm going to be able to help people. If I
Mhm.
didn't have that, I would never be where I am today. I would probably still be sitting on the couch daydreaming what if.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And I think like I know you and I go both through the same thing. It's like all of this inner work and all of these things that we're doing changes the way we show up in so many different ways. So, like segueing a little bit, what are kind of some of those red flags that you notice that people could be listening and thinking, like, oh, yeah, this is me? Like, this is, because I know the word binge eating kind of classifies probably some people, but there may be other signs or symptoms that food is a little bit more dominantly controlling their way of thinking and being in the world that maybe they aren't completely aware of yet. Does that
Yeah,
make
that's a
sense?
great question. Yeah, no, absolutely. I think the
Okay.
biggest thing, 'cause, yeah, when we talk about like binge eating, people think like, oh, like a diagnosed eating disorder. While yes,
Yeah.
many people have that, there are people who struggle with it that not necessarily have the diagnosed disorder. So I think one of the biggest red flags is how you use food. For example, people can overeat, right? We're all going to overeat. We're all going to go out to dinner and have too much cheesecake or too much pasta or whatever it is. That's one thing where we enjoy life and make the choice to
Hmm.
overeat. When it comes to binging and using food as a tool, one of the biggest red flags, like I said, is how we're using it in the sense of what is the rate at which we're eating. Like what I mentioned earlier, I had an entire box of cookies in maybe 3 minutes.
Yeah.
And it's like you're shoveling food. That's one. Also, if you're eating in secrecy, a lot of times people who struggle with this have a lot of guilt and shame around food and what they're eating. For example, I could have never back in the day, never had a slice of pizza or gone out to ice cream with a friend because to me that was messing up on my diet because I had to be perfect in
Mm-hmm.
front of everyone. So I would get the salad and then I would go home and eat at night or eat in my car and then hide the
Yeah.
evidence. If you have guilt and shame around what you're eating, so maybe you do it in secrecy, that's another red flag too.
Hmm.
And I think those are probably the two biggest, but
Yeah.
also something that we really can't diagnose looking at someone. It's more of like an internal question. What is the reason that we are eating? A lot of
Yeah.
times, especially moms, Renee, and I'm sure so many of your listeners can relate to this. And this was me 20 minutes before this call, literally in fight or flight with what was going on here. And so many times it's like we're eating to either numb, to
Mhm.
cope, to avoid. So if we're consistently on a consistent basis doing all those things, but also eating for like another reason besides hunger. And yes,
Yeah.
that's going to happen once in a while. This is like a consistent over and over way of eating followed by the guilt and shame
Yeah.
around it.
Yeah. Well, I was gonna say, like you said, like eating in secret. And I'm like, oh, I eat in secret a lot, but I think it's because I'm eating. I don't want to give it to my kids. I'm
Oh,
like,
that's
oh, I'm gonna eat over here in the closet and like tuck it away so that the kids don't
oh,
see that I'm eating it because then they're gonna want it. Like, or whatever.
that believe me, I can attest, I am a secret eater with the snacks because of my kid and, like, my mom always says that that's my punishment because I never shared my food, I still don't to this day, and now it's like my kids wanna eat, and I'm like, "Okay, should I say no to my kids or should I let them have some of my snacks?" So, yeah, that is a completely different ballgame, and I think
Yeah.
that's just, like, mom life in general.
Oh yeah. No, totally. But I do remember like especially like as a newer mom, I can remember just like collapsing in the bottom of my closet or wherever and just like eating food and just being like, this sucks. This is so hard. Like mom life's so hard. I'm going to just eat my cookies. Like, and I think that that's kind of the element of like when we use food as a way to meet those emotional needs and then those emotional needs don't ever then get processed or like actually physically expressed and like I know we were talking about this yesterday of like my hip and all the things. It's like, what emotion got trapped in my hip and is like, and it's like we create these diseases in our bodies or we create these patterns or we create these things because of the difficulty and sometimes the discomfort that we have in facing some of these emotions. And I think it goes back even to like when we talk about like the patterns that we were learned about around eating and food, but there's like these patterns and the behaviors that we learned around emotions. And for a lot of us when we were younger, it was like, don't cry, like you're okay, you're fine. Like I even heard it at the baseball game with my kid's son the other day. One of the kids got hit in the face with a baseball. And, you know, we're all out there, like everybody's going to get ice. And I hear this one grandma in the stands going, it's all right, son. You got it. Get up. You're good. Like, get up. You're all right. You're all right. And I'm like, what if he's not all right? What if he's like inside, like dying, you know, like he hurts, like it hurts. And so even just looking at that of like that generational transition too of how we handled emotions and what was considered okay for us to like actually process. Like this kid legitimately got hit in the face with a baseball. Like, why is it something that he has to get back up and he has to stop crying and he has to get back on with the game? Versus like, can we just let him cry? Like, can we let him be like okay in this pain and like it's not good? And so I think that is even a whole nother piece too of like unraveling not just like the way in which we were taught to handle food, but like the way we were taught to handle emotion. And like that way, I don't feel like my generation was really taught to feel emotions very well. And the emotions we were taught to feel were like all the positive, happy, good feeling emotions. And anytime any sort of grief or pain or frustration or betrayal or like shame, anytime those came up, it was like, we don't talk about those. Let's like put those in a closet and stuff them away and just like, it's okay. Come on, like brush it off. Like as much as I love my dad, that's one of his things is like, can we just like, let's just brush this off and forget about it. Like, let's just move on. Like, because sitting in those places and those emotions is not comfortable. And I think that that probably also is a big part of what stems where
Yeah,
you.
I totally resonate and understand what you're saying. You know,
Yeah.
my brother was a very sensitive, this a beautiful soul. And growing up, he would cry a lot. And like we would hear things all the time. And like, yes, for my parents, and like love them. And just like, don't be a baby, don't be a tattletale,
Mhm.
stop crying, but suck it up, walk it off, all these things, right? And you know, it's like now I have my son who is this sweet little 4-year-old. He is this sensitive, loving, kind, just the sweetest boy. Like yesterday, I was dropping him off at pre-K and there was a boy crying and my son started crying because he felt his emotions and then he went up and hugged the boy, but then he also didn't want to go to school because he was crying. And it's like
Yeah.
I see like my brother and I see this situation as like, okay, I would never ever tell my son to stop crying. It's okay to be sad, hug him. I'm there for him with the hopes that like he will be able to name, express, and process and move through his emotions when he gets older. Because I
Yeah.
know for me, that feeling in the beginning of this journey for me of being lost and feeling hopeless and feeling like just really unsure of myself, those were uncomfortable emotions. And I didn't know what to do with them. And we push it down, we push it
Mhm.
down, and we push it down. And for people that I help with, it's food. For some people, it's alcohol or
Yeah.
gambling or sex shopping and all these different things because when we don't realize that what we're doing is just a band-aid, once
Mhm.
we rip that band-aid off, it gets uncomfortable, but you have to go through it to like move through it.
Yeah. Yeah. So good. Okay. There's anything last that you feel like we want to leave people with?
Ooh, that's a good one. Honestly, I think one of the biggest things of this episode was just talking about like what happens when you're capable of listening to your
Yeah.
body and what happens when you learn what you need, not what
Mhm.
somebody else is telling you, not what this person on TikTok says. It's when we are able to recognize what we're going through, whether it's physical, mental, and emotional, you are a force to be reckoned with. And
Mhm.
I think so many women are not used to feeling that way. So we
Yeah.
continue to seek approval. We continue to
Yeah.
people please. We continue to have no boundaries. And now here's the thing like, I'm not sitting here like, hey, I figured it out, right? We're all a work in progress. But I think recognizing, hey, like, what can I do today to actually become the best version of me?
Mhm. So good. I love it. And it is so true. It's like, I think even too is like the more work you do on yourself and like the more you uncover it, the more you realize that there's still so much more to go. And recognizing even that I think for me, there was such a big transition. I've talked about it in the past, but like such a big transition of getting to this place of realizing I'm not on this excavation journey to find all the things that are wrong and like heal them and make them all better. It's like recognizing and realizing that's going to be a lifelong journey for the rest of my life. And like, how can I just accept where I am in a part of the journey and knowing that it's always going to evolve as we move forward. But I think that there's like this limbo space of like, once you start diving into the deep end of self development and like uncovering these things, it's like you realize it's just going to keep coming. Like there's still so much more that we like evolve and change, and it almost gets deeper. Like the work gets so much deeper than when we even start in the first place. And I think sometimes that can be a little bit daunting when you're in it, because you're like, when am I going to ever just reach this final destination and I feel great and amazing? And it's like, oh, we just continue to do it. It just continues to grow.
Then you look back and you see how you're a completely different person and you don't even recognize
Totally.
your old self.
Totally.
So,
Yeah. So good. Okay, Kelly, where can people find you?
ooh, well,
We can hang
everyone,
out.
you guys can find me on Instagram and TikTok at Kelly L Wellness, and my podcast, the Food Freedom Society podcast, which Miss Renee is on too.
Yes. 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 All right. Thanks so much, Kelly. This was awesome. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks, Renee.